G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to come up with, well, as it says, a little bit of an answer, well I suppose, to do some explanations about what is the best cartridge for a 2-mile shot. And I suppose I'll start with, if you're after or thinking there is a specific cartridge that is better than all others for everybody, there's not. There's not a better cartridge. It's a little bit of a how long's a piece of string question. So for those people who needed that answer, for the rest of us who want to go through and if I use one to make sense of what might suit you or might make sense for you, that's what this conversation is going to be about. And I suppose when it comes into the simple logic that most people would run with, what's the best cartridge for 2 miles, is it's got to be super fast and a super high BC. So if you can get up over 3,200 feet per second and you can have a ballistic coefficient in a G1 of the 1 sort of or better, then that should be the best cartridge. All those sorts of numbers. And no, that's not the case. It is part of the case, and certainly a good ballistic coefficient certainly helps. For those who don't understand what I'm talking about, it simply means the bullet is an efficient shape where it slips through the air more easily, and it means it slows down less. So it'll keep more speed, keeps more energy, and gets to the target faster. That's the whole logic. If it can get to the target, if your shot can be quicker getting to the target, then it's affected by gravity less, it's affected by wind less, so that makes it more consistent at getting to target. And in the fundamentals and on paper, absolutely, that's completely right. In reality, there's some other things going on. To start off, we're talking about a rifle and a shooter and a platform and probably a budget that are doing all this. And the simple fundamentals of this is when you go bigger, it gets more expensive and it gets harder. And what I mean by harder is there's a bigger rifle, there's more going on, and as much as some of the guys out there will tell you that my 416 or my whatever it is, this big cartridge, which is awesome cartridge, it's got really good speed and it's got a really good bullet, all those bits and pieces do it amazingly, what you'll generally find is the group isn't so awesome. It might be okay and they might be winning competitions, but there's other details involved with this. The biggest advantage that bigger gives you in ultra long range, so 2 miles, which we're talking about, so at least 3,520 yards, so that sort of neck of the woods, well over 3,000 meters. The big advantage that the big ones get and might suit you is the bigger splash. One of the hardest things about ELR, or ultra long range I should say, is being able to get onto target with the follow-up shots. So you need to see where things landed. So if you have the perfect conditions with perfect dry ground and you can see where every impact lands down to really small ones, then there's actually advantages about going to the other end. But if you can't see, or if you're shooting into a mountain face or on rock or onto trees and things where a lot of competitions are, then that bigger you get, the easier it is to see, the easier it is to correct onto target. There's always a trade-off of going bigger in the way of expense, in the way of setup and making the combination work, but largely you also find is the group is opening up. Now that is because the numbers of speed and ballistic coefficient don't put into that factor of recoil and the amount of harmonics and the amount of all the things that happen when you pull that trigger and how much things move around. And as you'll notice, generally, unless you're looking in competitions and unless you're looking on my channel, then in most cases things you'll see put forward only speak about a hit. They don't show groups, they don't show you the other details there. And I suppose the other thing to keep in mind in this world of social media and a little bit of egos on display, when someone's spent a lot of money on a firearm and it's a big firearm and it should be all these things, they're going to put it forward in maybe a little bit better light than what it actually is because they've got a lot invested in it. This is a very human trait, but it's something for you to keep in mind and consider. So that's the advantage of the big ones and the disadvantage of the big ones. The advantage of the little ones and the disadvantage of the little ones is for generally cost, yes, in building the rifle not so much, but in ammunition costs, in training costs, in practicing and that sort of stuff, then yes, there are some savings. A little bit in rifle side of things, not a huge amount, you know, you might be talking 10% to 50% difference in the rifle build. The big deal with the little ones is they're easy to shoot. You know, there's a lot less going on, there's a lot less bang, there's lots less thump, there's a lot less going on in the recoil when what you have to deal with, so how you deal with your recoil, how the rifle's set up. It's a lot easier to hold an amazingly good group with a very efficient little round. Now the little ones, I should explain that the big ones, that's a 50 BMG, and I'll put on a list on here, but a 416, a 408, a 375 Gibbs or my Gibbs, the 375 Shytac, the 33XC, that's sort of the big end of the range. The little end of the range, we've got a 6mm SAWM, a 6.5 SAWM, a 300 PRC, 7mm Rem mag, that's, what are we going into there? That's the 300 PRC there. We've got that's the 300 WSM, the 300 Win Mag, and then up to the 300 Norma. Anyway, I'll put a whole list of what we got on there. The deal is, the likes of the 6mm SAWM is super easy to shoot. Now it's doing 300, 400 feet per second, I think it is. With, that was the 115 grain, we can now go to the 109 grain projectile. And actually it's got pretty good speed. It's still got half the ballistic coefficient, so it's still effectively slowing down twice as much as the big projectiles over the other end here. This is an 800 grain projectile, that's a 500 grain projectile, that's a 450 grain projectile, so it's still, you know, offset in the way of the weight, but the recoil, the way it behaves, the dynamics of the rifle, very easy to shoot. 6.5 sort of similar, 300 WSM sort of similar. It's now running, that's a 220 grain projectile, so it's stepping up there, and most of the 30 cals are shot in the 230s or 245s or 250 grain projectiles. So still a lot less weight, but a lot less recoil. The negative of these little fellas, for as good a group as they hold down, they are taking longer to get to target, so there's a bit bigger pattern, so your conditions are relevant to that, in moderate or consistent, and it's not really about wind speed, it's about the changes in wind speed. So on a consistent wind speed, they still do that job fine. The big deal is seeing impacts. If you're shooting into a rock face, 2 miles, you're not going to see an impact from a 100 grain projectile, simple as that, not unless there's something special going on that bit of rock. The moment it goes in behind something, hits behind some grass or behind a tree, that sort of stuff, you're just not going to see anything. So you might only be 2 MOA or even 1 MOA off your actual target, but then unless you can see, you may as well be 200 metres off the target. If you don't know what it is, you don't know where to correct, so you shoot again and hope, or do you hold a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, do you get a little bit further away for a target, or do you luck it onto target? So not being able to see is a massive thing. And in truth, that even in really good conditions, the 6mm, as much as we had a crack at it, we didn't get on target. It shot okay, it was a decent group for sure, but I still had too many couldn't sees in there to really use it. You need really pristine conditions, so not something you'd consider in competition or that type of thing. 6.5 a little the same. Haven't done the 300 PRC, like I said, but in that conversation, the 7mm Rem mag, I did that, got onto target very easily. That hold down an amazing group. Still needed really good conditions, but that was probably the easiest one I've ever done it with. That's 4 years ago now, but that was super easy. 300 Win Mag wasn't a lot different, but shot really, really well, really easily. You step up into the 338s, and to be truthful, the 338 in the way of any sort of competition, I think there is also, if you're actually talking about a 2 mile and you're actually going to competition, check out the competitions. Competitions are something that I suppose I have a little bit of issues with, largely not because of the concept of the competition, but because conditions are in so much control. So comparing and trying to find the best shooters and try and do it in a competition status, the conditions in my mind have, from what I've experienced, more control than everything else. So no matter good the shooter is, no matter good his equipment is, no matter good his team is, unless he's got the right conditions. So, and then competitions will tend to have politics and things involved with it, which means it ends up trying to get the right result sometimes, but maybe at the compromise to someone who is as good but doesn't have the connections or the teamwork to be able to get the best conditions which the other guys got. And maybe vice versa. Don't know, haven't been there, not my thing. But that is the nature of, in part of the nature of a competition, is to try and end up where they can make the competition work. They will be starting to push into, and I think they have in cases where they've gone where even the 338, or there'll be a level where they won't let compete in the bigger stuff. Too small, they won't let go in there. Not because it can't do it, but because if you can't see, you can't move forward. So you just wasted a time slot in the way of trying to fit the shooting into it. They need to make sure they can go forward, so they need to bring in some rules to make that work. So there's a logical reason to it. But it means if it's about competition, do your research, find out. If they've decided the 375 is the smallest you can go to, then your decision's already partly been made for you. If it's just about play and trying multiple ones, then I've found that this is probably the two middle of the road ones that shot really, really well. Not too much in the way of recoil, but I was very happy with how they performed. That was in the likes of the 300 Rum, which is similar to the 300 Norma. That was easier to shoot, but shot really well, really consistent, really happy with it. The Rum, I think we didn't get onto target. The Norma, we did get onto target. So both worked really well. My first one at 2 miles was the 300 the 338 Lapua Magnum. Awesome, got there. Rifle not, but I did a lot of learning back there, but that was many years ago now, on at 2 miles, a real definite hit, 24-inch plate. I'll keep in mind, most competitions aren't talking 24-inch plates, they're talking 2 to 3 to 4 to 10 times larger than that, depends what the competition is. But that happened a long time ago, and that shot well. And the 338 Lapua would do it well. The 338 Lapua in the 300 Edge, very similar in how they perform, so both going to do the job very well. The 33XC, the tub extra capacity 338 cartridge. That certainly, it's in extra capacity, it sees all of it. It is designed to where it does run at that level, performs really, really well, and probably of all competitions, I can't see why you wouldn't let that in. That was nice, good energy, and a nice simple lead core bullet, so nothing too complicated on that side of things. Perform well, and probably the bottom end of the top end, right smack in the middle, where it's sort of top end of the little fellas, but it's bottom end of the really big stuff, but still more manageable in recoil, and worked really nicely. That worked really well. Lapua bolt face is what you're going to need to do it, but it's not into past that point. So 33XC, very good. And then stepping up into the Shitax in the 375, I use the Gibbs. Obviously, we're on at 4Ks. We got to where we haven't got back there, we haven't had the air conditions, but got to a ridiculously small group around a 24-inch plate at 5,000 plus yards. So super happy with that. Monolithic bullets in that state. And there's some other details in going with the monolithic bullets, but actually not too heavy on the recoil in the big game world. They're little on the recoil, but very, very good, worked really nicely. And then obviously with the 408, which we've been shooting recently, the 416, and then the 50 BMG, and then there's different 416s and the 460s and things like that. All that sort of stuff, I suppose in that big range, what I want to say is that the same deal. The bigger you get, the numbers start to look better in one place. Actually shooting it, generally you'll find that's not as good. Same with the big, there's the 50 BMG 416, so where they don't shorten, they just neck down the 50 BMG and put the 416 cartridge in there. On paper, awesome. Lots of speed. Generally that sort of thing, they're not quite as efficient for the extra powder you get into them. But you recoil the level of effort, and there's also barrel burning. Don't really see much of that, but depends how you use it, especially if you want to practice a lot with it, then the cost in replacing barrels in low development in brass, that sort of stuff is going to be big. But the ultimate thing is the ability to shoot them, it raises. It's just harder to do. It's harder to make it work properly. I've certainly proven with my bigger platforms, they take more effort. Now, there's a bit of R&D attached to what I'm doing, but it's simply not straightforward. But if I was in conditions, obviously I'm after trying to ridiculously small groups. So I am pushing for extra levels on that level. In the normal competition, shooting at 1 MOA or a little bit over 1 MOA targets, And the biggest deal you've got is the terrain, the conditions in the terrain. That's the biggest deal you've actually got to deal with. So seeing your misses, that's the biggest problem you've got. Then bigger has a real advantage. And then generally for those guys, the 375s to the 416s is the place you're going to be playing in, because everything else doesn't give you that sort of stuff. The moment you come back down a little bit and you've got specific conditions which are better, or you've got choices to have things, you're going into this competition and which one will I use, then I would tend to base it around that. And I'd come back to even probably the easiest one I ever got into 2 miles, which shot that held the, well, not the best, but a very, very good group, was the 700, the 7mm Ren Magnum. That shot awesomely, but it's not going to fit any competition. My 375 Gibbs was probably the one that on its first day, this is a lot of years ago now, on its first day I was punching holes through plates at 2,400 yards, one after the other. Even though I didn't have the rifle set up awesomely, it still, with all its setup it did have, it still shot really, really well. The ones that I've done the most work with to make them work properly, and I'm getting there, but like I said, some R&D involved with that sort of stuff, but was the big ones. These ones here, which on paper are the best on the mouse, the best doing everything, they've taken more work to get to this place. And I've only got one of them through steel, the other one's about to. But there's a bit going on with the 50 BMG, which is really, in all considerations I can think, for the average punter and even the average very experienced shooter's job, the 50 BMG is just a step too far. There's no benefits in that place. It's not what most people think it is. The 50 BMG's got to be the best for ultra long range. No. The BMG was never designed as a precision rifle round or designated marksman round. It was designed as a machine gun round. The rifle got turned into that. You know, Barrett are the guys that turned that into something to use as a marksman round, which really, when at time that turned into something other than a really heavy hitter at moderate distance, although a big bullet out long ways, cartwheeling along the ground can still do lots of damage. Really, the 416 turns into is the designated marksman of that cartridge. Neck down, shrunk down, but then a lot more speed, a lot more precision, a lot easier to shoot. Still, big one, don't get me wrong, but that's where it turns into really in the top end of target stuff in the design of the cartridge. And of course, the 408. Or the 408 in the Shytac, which then turned into 375 Shytac. This in the middle here is my 375 Gibbs. Those ones are sort of, well, the 338 Apua was a designated extreme long range round in its time. And then all the bits and pieces that work with those. Those are still big ones. The guys who are trying to fit into the middle of the round where it's got less recoil, easier to shoot, but still got lots of energy. You're really talking about like the 375 Enabler, you're talking about the 33XC, and there's a few in around that range where you're using moderate size, you're only using Lapua bolt faces, so moderate size actions. You're talking still a fair bit of recoil, but moderate recoil for the target platforms you're talking about. Whether you're talking using lead core bullets or monolithic bullets, you've got choices in that range. So those are ones that are trying to thread the needle and do very well. In saying that, you'll still find in some of the conditions of some of the ELR, ultra long range stuff, that a 300 gram projectile is struggling to be seen in some of those conditions. So going to the big one has some advantage. And equally, some of those still have a lot of recoil. So some of the smaller ones for really good conditions are going to be a little bit easier to shoot. Ultimately, listen, it is what I started off with. There isn't a specific answer, but there might be something in that if you join those dots together with your competition's rules, with what your budget and what you want to do, with what sort of shooter you are, how much effort you put into it, that sort of stuff that you'll be able to thread the needle to find what suits for what you want in your conditions, in your circumstances, that sort of things. So, listen, one thing I want to touch back onto in this conversation is I get asked reasonably regularly, when are you coming to King of 2 Miles? It'd be great if you came to King of 2 Miles. It'd be really good to see you guys at King of 2 Miles. And I suppose the simple answer to go with that is, listen, I'm not a competition guy. It's not something that rings my bell. I like competing with myself, I like competing with physics, I like competing with the elements, that sort of stuff. But as for individuals, I suppose I've heard it put a way that I would say pretty much suits me. I'm not someone who really likes to win in competing with individuals and competing with teams and competing that sort of stuff. I've done it as a younger man, working in race teams and that sort of stuff and various situations in my life. But I don't particularly want to take away something that matters a lot to them. They really want to win. I sort of want them to win too. I don't need to beat them. Equally, I'm not that good at losing. I can't stand losing either. So I get it, competitions are competitions, all best man won, all that sort of stuff. I understand that logic. I've sort of got a foot in both camps, so it doesn't suit me that much. But the bigger deal is money and time. I don't have them. We run really hard. We work all the time. That's the simple nature of it. We don't have holidays. That hasn't been something that's in our life for 30 years. And to make it happen, the cost of the shutting down 2 businesses, the travel costs, the expenses of all that sort of stuff, the costs of firing things back up, that's an astronomical cost that is way outside what anyone other than running a businesses or a couple of businesses themselves, like we do, wouldn't really understand. But it's a lot more than you can imagine. So it's not something that while we're running our businesses, while we're doing this, that we could conceive. But like I said, I'm not altogether that attracted to do it. One day, I think, retired or something like that, be great to come along, be a spectator, great to come along and do an expose to show off and watch a shoot that for real, that sort of thing, for sure. But actually going into competition, it's not something that I have a lot of attraction to do. Apologise for that if that disappoints, but that's sort of a bit the nature of the creature you're looking at. Anyway, that's about what I can tell you. That I hope that's of some value. Like I said, there's no specific answer. Anyone who does give you a specific answer is either knows all your details and answering those, or they're giving some generalized stuff, which generalized stuff is what it is. It isn't particularly right. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for checking in. Let us know what you think below. And other than that, we'll catch you next time.